What is up, everybody? Welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast. Was that Show Me the Meaning backwards?
That was backwards.
Yeah. Okay, that's very good. Okay, well, before we start unpacking this, let's just try to give a recap for our listeners. And I'll be honest, this is kind of a cheating recap this time around because this is kind of a batshit crazy plot. So here we go.
Otherwise it'd be 2 hours long, the fucking recap.
Yeah. So John David Washington plays the protagonist, a CIA agent participating in an extraction operation as the film opens in an opera house. His life is saved by a bullet unfiring. Later, he's recruited by an organization called Tenet, and they brief him on a technology that uses inverted entropy to move backwards through time. Are you following? Follow with this here. I'm going to try to... It's confusing. Here we go.
Yeah.
Now, this is what explains the unfiring bullet. These bullets are then traced to an arms dealer in Mumbai, who then leads them to her source, who's the Russian oligarch Andrei Sater, played by Kenneth Branagh. Now, the protagonist then teams up with Robert Pattinson, whose name is Neil, and they head to London, where they track down Sater's wife, Kat, who's an art appraiser, who's being blackmailed by her husband to control her in their relationship. Neil and the protagonist hatch a scheme to steal this drawing that's being used in the blackmail setup. And while they're there, they fight these two masked men who emerge from the turnstile, which is a machine that can invert the entropy of objects and people and make things go backwards, right? And then, of course, later we find out, spoiler, that these two people were actually Neil and the protagonist, okay? So just keep that in mind. Anyway, the protagonist is now teamed up with Pattinson. Oh, I'm sorry, I said that already. Okay, here we go. We're going to jump forward here. Even I'm getting confused in my own recap. So I went backwards. I went through the turnstile. Kat, the wife of Sater, then introduces the protagonist to Sater, who plans to kill him until the protagonist saves his life. Then they decide to strike up a partnership to retrieve a case that contains plutonium-241, which is the element responsible for entropy inversion. But Neil and the protagonist go rogue and steal the case. However, they're ambushed by an inverted Sater who's holding Kat hostage. The protagonist gives Sater an empty case and saves Kat, but is later captured and taken to a warehouse with a turnstile. Again, that technology that you go through that inverts the thing, right? Bad things end up happening, Kat gets shot, and this leads to the protagonist going through the turnstile and moving backwards through time to fix all of the shenanigans. Neil then reveals later on that he too is actually a part of Tenet. They then learn that Sater is collecting these artifacts around the world to try to create an algorithm that will invert the entropy of the whole Earth. Kat tells them that Sater is dying from cancer, so basically he's going full-on chaos maniac here, and they got to stop him. You dig so far? Okay. Then at the end, Tenet, the organization, they track down the algorithm in Siberia, where it's heavily guarded, and then a war of forward-moving and backward-moving people breaks out. Kat kills Sater right as the protagonist secures the algorithm. Neil and P, the protagonist, break up the algorithm and they end up parting ways. And then Neil reveals that he was actually recruited by the protagonist in the future and has been moving backwards this entire time. And then the big reveal at the end is that, in fact, the protagonist was the mastermind behind Tenet this entire time. Well, the future him, that is. Did I do it? Is that kind of it?
Really makes you think.
So who is the real protagonist?
Okay, so I didn't dislike it as much as both of you. I went and saw it in the theater, actually. Did you guys see it in the theater or on just on your...
I saw it. Well, I saw it at the drive-in the first time.
Oh, sweet. Okay, that'd be kind of fun. I mean, I saw it in the theater here in Sydney because, you know, our lockdowns aren't as serious and whatnot. So, but it was funny because it was just me and my girl, and there was nobody else in the theater. And so we were able to like just obnoxiously talk to each other throughout. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, do you like? She looks at me and she's like, "Do you understand this?" I'm like, "I'm writing a book on the philosophy of time, and I'm a little bit confused right now." You know? So like that was kind of nice that we could. And she's from Brazil, so English is her second language. So she's like, I'm having a hard time understanding this. And I'm like, no, I think it's the mix because I'm having a hard time understanding a lot of this too. So I went through it and I was a little bit frustrated with some of it. And then I kind of kind of got into it. I kind of enjoy a puzzle, and I enjoy a little bit of kind of nerdy scientific poetry. And I think that's kind of what we got here. Like, it's not scientific and it's not poetic, as in like narrative or like Terrence Malick or something like that. It's not like that, right? And it isn't like a nice narrative, like you just said. There's a lot to say about how he doesn't write characters very well, and have human relationships aren't all that great all the time. So that was missing. And then, of course, the science is kind of like, oh, it's theoretical and it's speculative, but it's kind of fun to play with. But kind of that hodgepodge of where they all meet together, I kind of just got into it by the end, and I just let it kind of be weird and baffling. And then I was talking with a friend who's a pretty critical film watcher and director. I've mentioned it before. His name's Keir Seward. He's an award-winning director based in London. And he's kind of like, just watch this movie as though it's like a Bond film, and don't worry about the plot, and don't try to let it make sense, and just like freaking enjoy the kind of the evil villain that's trying to take over the world because he's got cancer, and he's like, fuck it, I'm just gonna throw a match into this fucking powder keg and blow it all up. And then you've got the guy that's doing the crazy impossible thing. You know, he's like, just think of it like that, and then you can kind of enjoy it. And so on my second watch, that's what I did. And to be fair, I watched it at 1.5 speed as well. And
why do you guys keep doing this?
Well, I had already seen it.
Ain't nobody got time for Tenet.
I had already seen it, and so I knew what my first impression was, and I was like, I just want to kind of like be exhilarated by the ride. And you know what? At 1.5 speed, thinking of it like a Bond film, I actually kind of enjoyed it. So that's what I'm just going to say.
Well, Christopher Nolan idolizes the Bond films, and he has said explicitly like that he took this as his opportunity to make a Bond movie from the the handsome protagonist, the gadgets, and the globe-trotting, and the state-of-the-art watercrafts, and all this stuff that's like being squeezed into this movie. And I get that, but that stuff also doesn't really feel like a full meal to me in a Bond film. I think it fails in the same way that Bond movies fail, which is that there's still kind of a personality vacuum at the middle of it. I think Ryan was about to say something. What do you got, Haley?
Who's the real protagonist of Tenet? Is it the protagonist?
The protagonist is the people, the friends that we made backwards
along the way.
Along the way. Yeah.
It's time itself.
I will say something about John David Washington. He was the first person cast in this movie, and fine actor. And I think that there is like a scrap of characterization with him. That there's that scene when he's talking to Michael Caine, and Michael Caine says something snarky at the end of it about, if you're going to play a billionaire, you can't do it in a Brooks Brothers suit or something like that. And I can't remember what John David Washington's response is, but it has the attitude of like, hey, I don't tell you how to count your money and eat caviar. Don't tell me how to spy. And I wish the movie had leaned more into that this is a guy who's like trying to do the right thing, but he's not necessarily out of his depth so much as just like having to question this sort of upper echelon society that he has to run around in, and all these connections that he has to make, having to play someone that he finds like really despicable, or I like that sort of fish out of water approach with the character, and I wish there was more of that to his characterization. And I kind of wish that Elizabeth Debicki had a similar energy, because maybe that could have been the thing that made them recognize each other as kindred spirits, that like, hey, we're both kind of strangers in a strange land, and then you add all the science fiction stuff on top of that, and then the two of them could be like each other's sort of human or emotional anchor in all the chaos.
I thought he was so good in Black Klansman, right? And he played such a kind of a weird character that had a strange personality where I'm like, did Spike Lee direct him to be like that, or did he come to the set with that? That whenever I knew that he was going to be the lead in this movie, I was like, sick. This guy makes bold choices, and not saying he didn't live up to it. It's just kind of like you were saying, to me it was a little bland, which I guess is
Yeah.
Chris Nolan's flavor of every one of his movies. Is I want it to be a little bland. Everyone just be a little, not really remarkable. It's mainly about my plot, you know.
Yeah. I'm wondering what like the directing notes were. Is he more like, is it like, hey, I want you to be cool, and I want him to be aloof, and I want him to be impassioned, or something? Like I'm trying to figure out, because it was like this constant steely demeanor the whole time, and I too thought that we lost a little of his charm and charisma, and that's one of the things that Bond has that you would want any sort of like knockoff or imitation to also have, right? Is there's some sort of charm, charisma, there's a magnetism, and I felt that was lost a little bit with this character. Even Robert Pattinson had it a little bit, but that's just because I think he puts it on, right?
He's a pretty smooth operator, yeah.
Yeah, but I wonder if Nolan like intentionally was like, you know, deliver this line as like a throwaway. You know, I'm like trying, like, what was it? Like be cooler, you know?
Yeah, I think he wants
something.
I think that this guy's supposed to be hardcore. You know, he went and he literally takes a cyanide pill in the first like scene, right? So you're like, all right, this guy will do anything for the mission, right? So I guess he's supposed to be just cool as ice, under pressure. But then that's not that fun to watch over a literally 2.5 hour long movie. When I don't know, it just didn't work.
Yeah, and that also being the way the character is introduced, I don't necessarily know that it contrasts with his obsession with this one woman and her kid, but it's like, this is a guy who is willing to put mission above self to the point that he, lunges out of his chair to swallow a silver cyanide capsule. I don't understand why this just random relationship with this woman and her son is all of a sudden what's animating him, when it seems even beyond what we see in the movie, he's still predominantly animated by like, get this fucking mission done. Like he's the one who brings Tenet all together. I don't know. I really do like John David Washington as an idea in this. I think he has such a sincerely, I think he has such an interesting presence. You know, he's like this absurdly athletic guy. He's a former professional football player, and when he goes into he is. He used to play in like the United Football League, I think.
Damn.
Okay.
And when he's in that kitchen scene and he's roughing up all those goons, even though they all are a foot taller than him, you kind of believe it. There's a weird physicality to the guy, and he has this great presence, this really commanding presence. But I think a lot of his magnetism and his energy is kind of dampened by the sort of mandate of this film's plot. And I think that's a problem with a lot of Christopher Nolan's movies, moreover, is that his characters just become plot mechanisms. They're just people in beautifully tailored suits to whom a plot happens. And I think that's to his film's detriment a lot of the time.
I mean, so what is the plot of this film? Like, what is? I mean, not just like what's the designing principle? Yeah, like what's the point of this film? What's actually the story?
I'm glad that someone gets to do this. I'm glad that someone gets to make this movie. It is such an audacious vision, but it just keeps coming back to that notion for me that's like, but what is it really in service of?
Okay,
like
this is what I think.
What's really going on here?
This is what I ultimately think. Let's pause like a reset on the production of films. Let's say that there are no new films that are in production right now, and we can choose what kind of films get made for the next 100 years, right? I would cut out 90% of the crap that's getting put out on Netflix, right? But you know what? I would not say let's not make Tenet again. Like, I still want Tenet in the vault of films that are being made. Whereas there's a lot of films that I don't even want them made, right? Like, even if I don't even like the fact that they're there. They're like messing with people's brains. They're like lowering our tastes and our sensibilities. They're maybe even harmful for us. Like, who knows? There's a lot of stuff that I'm like, man, I wish that wasn't even there. But films like Tenet, like, I feel like that I still want it there. I still want it in the catalog.
If you're asking me, do I want giant budget, weird sci-fi original scripts?
Absolutely.
Yes, I want those all day, every day. But if you're asking me if I want Tenet, no, 0%. I hated it.